This week, September 12th through the 17th, 2023, the comet Nishimura will be coming closest to Earth than it has been in over 400 years. In fact, the last time it was this close to Earth was when Shakespeare was writing Romeo and Juliet in the 1590s. This week, we're going to take a look at the history of this comet and whether it was visible for Shakespeare during his lifetime. Let's find out right now on That Shakespeare Life. Hi there, I'm Cassidy Cash, and this is That Shakespeare Life. Back in Shakespeare's lifetime, there weren't electric street lamps and there wasn't electricity, so all of the light pollution that keeps you from seeing celestial happenings today, especially if you live in the city, would not have been present for Shakespeare's lifetime, which means he had a much greater opportunity to see things like comets and shooting stars and galaxies. When he looked up in the night sky, there was a lot more that was visible for him than is for us today. That's why people like Tycho Brahe was able to set up an astronomical observatory and witness comets like the one in 1577 or the supernova of 1572, both of which Tycho Brahe recorded in great detail as something he witnessed, and he even drew some pictures of these events that survive today. Another famous astronomer you probably recognize is Galileo. He also witnessed several events happening in the night sky during Shakespeare's lifetime, and Galileo actually did build a telescope with which to view these phenomenon, but telescopes for Galileo, he didn't finish his until 1609. So if Galileo did see Nishimura, it wasn't with his telescope because he didn't finish it until later. You may think that that's because telescope technology wasn't available for Shakespeare's lifetime, but that's not accurate. Surprisingly, there were telescopes. The 16th century was when the telescope was first invented, and we know that it was present in the late 16th century, like the 1590s, around when Nishimura was visiting, but it was really rudimentary. It was like the very first ones, and the first person who is credited with inventing the telescope is actually a German-Dutch man named Hans Lippershey. Lippershey is considered the inventor of the telescope, but that's because he was the first person to get a patent on it in 1608. Not because he was actually the first person to make it. There are other people who made a telescope before him, but there's less documentation about who that was and what the details around those are. We just see references in various documents that tell us it existed before Lippershey, but Lippershey was the first person to put a patent on it. So you'll see him credited as the inventor of the telescope. Galileo was actually using Lippershey's design when he made his telescope in 1609. And by 1611, Johannes Kepler, who is one of the fathers of the 17th century scientific revolution, would make a design that takes things even further. And that means the technology to witness comets and celestial happenings with a telescope did exist for Shakespeare's lifetime. But obviously, this was new technology. And Shakespeare was rather an average guy who was doing his own thing and working in London and definitely not an astronomer. So it's unlikely he would have personally seen or used a telescope. But much like you and I kind of keep peripheral tabs on the technology that's new for us today, and we know what, loosely what's happening with companies like Tesla or SpaceX and the latest cool thing that's coming out, Shakespeare would have been keeping peripheral tabs on what was happening in his lifetime as well. These would have been reported on. They would have been major advancements for science and technology, and they would have been something that Shakespeare was aware of. All that to conclude, however, that it's not likely Nishimura, the comet, was actually witnessed by very many people in London in the 1590s when the comet last visited Earth. And I shouldn't say 1590s because 1590 is when we think Nishimura was last visible. And scientists do a lot of very precise mathematical calculating to come up with that, so I should be precise as well. But that is not being visible is because we know that the comet itself is just really hard to see from Earth. It goes right along the horizon. So unless you have a clear and unobstructed view of the horizon, it's going to be hard to see. It's definitely hard to see with the naked eye because of where it's positioned. It's hard anyway, but then how it passes Earth makes it even harder than that. So without a really powerful telescope, it's not something that you're going to just walk out and accidentally see for sure. And you're going to have to know it's coming and really be looking out for it, both of which I don't think most people in the 16th century would have been doing. And it would have taken a much more powerful telescope than what was available in Shakespeare's lifetime to really get a good view of this comet, which is why they probably wouldn't have been seeing it. And that helps explain why people like Tycho Brahe, who did record many major celestial events of this period, isn't known to have any writings on Nishimura's last visit. I will place some links below this episode for you to check out where it's going to be visible and whether or not it's possible for you to see it. But my official recommendation is that you check out some of the cool astrophotography that the professionals have gone out and captured, since just like Shakespeare, we probably aren't going to be able to see Nishimura this time either. If you're interested in celestial happenings, supernovas, and eclipses, which were visible in Shakespeare's lifetime, we have 2 podcast episodes, one with Michael Rowan Robinson and the other with Dan Falk, both of which are scientists and historians of science. And they come onto the show to share more information on the comet from 1577 and the supernova of 1572, both of which we think Shakespeare not only could have witnessed, but we actually think he did. There's textual evidence from his plays that suggests he saw these, and it's possible that they were really pivotal moments from his childhood, because Shakespeare was born in 1564. So he would have been like 8, 9, almost 10 years old when these were happening. The supernova of 1572, he would have been, I think that's 8 years old. I'm trying to do really fast math. And then 1577, he would have been about 12. So both of these he would have witnessed in his lifetime, because they were big and they would have been across the sky. Again, without that light pollution, you'd have seen it if you were outside and you'd have known this was happening. So you can check out some of the evidence for why we think Shakespeare saw these and what the impact was on London when they happened, all packed into these podcast episodes. And I'll link to both of those in the show notes. Be sure to check them out. There's extra history in the actual notes, but you can also hear from the experts on the podcast. So that's it for this week. I'm Cassidy Cash. Thank you for watching and joining me in this trek into the history of science and comets for Shakespeare's lifetime. If you like this kind of history, hit like and subscribe, because I'll be back next week with even more history. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.